Good morning. Welcome to the House Committee on Water and Land. We're having a hearing today on Tuesday, March 23rd at 8:30 a.m. via video conference when we are in conference room 430 at the state capitol. We have a number of measures today, some Senate bills and some House concurrent resolutions that we'll be considering. Thank you to everyone who has joined us on video to provide their testimony. Since there are a number of folks who are providing testimony that have not done so before, let me give you a little rules of the road here. In order to allow as many people to testify as possible, there will be a 2-minute time limit per testifier. Because morning hearings must adjourn prior to noon with our floor session, not all testifiers may have the opportunity to testify. In that event, please know that your written testimony will be considered by the committee. All the committee members have your written testimony. Please be so kind as to keep yourself muted and your video off while you're waiting to testify and after your testimony is complete. The Zoom chat function will allow you to chat with the technical staff only. So please use the chat only for technical issues. If you are disconnected unexpectedly, don't worry, you may attempt to rejoin the meeting. If disconnected while presenting testimony, take a deep breath, try to join back again, and then we'll let you continue as long as time permits. Please note that the House is not responsible for any bad internet connections on the testifier's end. In the event of a catastrophic network failure, it may be necessary to reschedule the hearing or to schedule a meeting for decision making. In that case, an appropriate notice will be posted. Please maintain decorum and refrain from profanity or any uncivil behavior. Such behavior may be grounds for removal from the hearing without the ability to rejoin. So thank you again for joining us today for our hearing. And we will begin with Senate Bill 140, SD2 HD1, relating to community development. We have testimony from a number of folks, and we have providing oral testimony from HCDA, Mr. Deepak Nupane. Mr. Deepak Nupane, please proceed. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Branco, and the members of the committee. HCDA supports SB 140, SD2 HD1. We have one request on a minor change on page 2, line 14, where it says part transit-oriented development zone improvement project. We suggest that the improvement project be a change to improvement program. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the testimony.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your hard work on this measure. Next, we have testimony from DLNR in support. Mr. Russell Suji, if you're available, please proceed.
Yes, good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Russell Suji will stand on our testimony in strong support of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in support from Mary Alice Evans and Rodney Funakoshi with the Office of Planning. The floor is yours. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Tarnas and Vice Chair Branco and members of the Water Land Committee. The Office of Planning stands in strong support of SB 140, and we also support HCDA's proposed change. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Evans. Always nice to see you. We have written testimony with comments from Wayne Takamine, Kaka'ako Makai Community Planning Advisory Council. Written testimony with comments from Hawaii Thousand Friends, and then a number of individuals have written testimony in opposition. Charles Prentice, Jennifer Lane, Christine Otto Za'a, Jerry Lamb, Bill Hicks, and Charlene Chun Lum. They're concerned about the definition of the TOD, meaning that we might establish TODs around bus stops as opposed to just the transit stations. That's all the testimony that we have received on Senate Bill 140. Members, any questions of our testifiers? Vice Chair Branco, please proceed.
For Office of Planning, please.
Yes, Vice Chair Branco.
Thank you, Mary Alice. My question is, why does the bill not clearly define what is a transit station?
Representative Branco, I'm going to defer to HHFDC and HCDA, but let me give you my thought. The transit-oriented development is designed to be statewide, not just for Oahu. And so it looks different on each island. For instance, there are transit hubs and transit corridors in Wailuku and Maui, in Hilo, in Kailua Kona, on Kauai, that do not have transit stations in the sense that Oahu is planning with HART. So the definition needs to be broad enough to accommodate all the different ways that public transit can give residents choices, and state agencies can build affordable housing and mixed-use developments in those areas. Is that helpful?
It is. And the reason why I asked the question to you, because I know you're familiar with the windward side. We have that bus station by Goodyear tires. So I knew you'd be familiar with, and that's kind of the point of my question is folks are concerned in our community that that station could possibly be characterized or fall under this bill.
Personally, I don't see that happening. But should the county decide that that should become a transit stop, in some very distant future, I suppose there would need to be community input on whether that is something they would like. The Office of Planning and HCDA and HHFDC all include community input in all of our planning, and we take that input very seriously.
Thank you. For HCDA, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. The first question is, does this bill include public involvement and comment as required at the county level in land use and infrastructure plan?
It's certainly the chair. I believe city and county has already gone through that process in some of the transit stations around Waipahu, Ala Moana, and before adopting the plan. If there is no city and county plan and HCDA has to create a transit-oriented development zone, it will have to go through public process of collecting, making community presentations and taking testimony from the neighborhoods and then any interested parties. So we go through a rigorous public process in adopting any plans.
Could you let me know how far in advance the community would be informed that there was this proposal?
Community will be involved or notified from the very beginning of the process.
Next question is, there's a concern in my community that this bill will allow TOD in downtown Kailua where transit hubs are planned. How does this bill prevent that?
I believe, Vice Chair, the intent of the bill is to focus on the Honolulu Rapid Transit, which is the heart. And I believe that's where the focus is. I don't believe in communities like Kailua. Like Mary Alice said, maybe in the very distant future, there may be a TOD, but within my lifetime, I don't envision that really.
Okay, thank you. Last question. With this bill, what type of development do you foresee happening, and what does that mean for communities outside the rail corridor?
As far as Hawaii Community Development Authority's role is concerned, it's only on the infrastructure improvements. So it's like improving sewer and water line and power and those kind of things. So we're really not involved in any of the vertical development that happens.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Representative Kobayashi.
I'm wondering who wrote the definition for small business? It's at the very end of section 3, and it says that small business means a business that is independently owned and is not dominant in its field of operation. To me, that means that Bank of Hawaii is a small business. It means that any of the hotels might be considered, or many of the hotels might be considered a small business. I suppose, well, I could go on, I think, in terms of there should be elsewhere in the statute, I would think, a definition of small business. Can somebody respond? Who wrote that definition and why is it written so loosely?
Chair, if I may.
Yes, please proceed.
Member Kobayashi, I believe the definition comes from the board membership for Hawaii Community Development Authority. And I believe the intent was to, after definition was to make sure that the business representative, the way it's defined is that it will be a small business representative from the district.
So, I mean, would you agree with me that this could include, this definition for small business could include Bank of Hawaii and many of our biggest hotels?
Let me look at the definition, but I believe the intent was to just, limit it to the businesses within the community development district.
I see. Well,
and the current members are, representing a small businesses or a nonprofit. I think that's another option. Are small businesses within the community development district.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? Representative Ganadin.
Let's see. To Ms. Evans. Good morning.
Good morning.
Considering your testimony.
Could you please move your microphone close to you? So
I
we
tend to
hear
do
you.
this. I tend to be.
You're soft spoken, so please
Yeah,
bring it right
all right.
next to you there. Thank you.
Apologies. In hearing your testimony, as well as the HCDA's testimony just now, it's kind of clear to us that this is intended to discuss the rail line. I'm wondering, and I represent District 30, which includes 4 stops of the rail. I'm wondering why, starting with page 9, going to page 13 of the bill draft, it's discussing amending, well, section 3 in its entirety, amending section 206E3. It's discussing representatives from He'eia, Ko'olaupoko, and Kalailoa, instead of communities that we know rail is being developed at, Ewa, Kalihi, Halawa, Kapolei. I'm wondering what the thought process was behind this.
Representative, can I ask Rodney Funakoshi, the head of our TOD project team, to respond to your question? Rodney, I believe, is on this Zoom. Would that be all right?
Please proceed, Mr. Funakoshi.
Hi. Yeah, I believe it's more the framework of the 206Es. It's probably better addressed by Deepak on how the law is structured. But yeah, certainly the intent though is the TOD line of the rail corridor. But probably Deepak can better comment on the framework in which the new section is constructed.
Deepak, could you address the question, please?
Yes, certainly, Chair. I believe, as Rodney mentioned, it's within the framework of 206E3, creating the boards for various community development district, and to address the representative's question on representation. I believe the TOD portion of the board, there are 3 at-large members that represent the broader community, and the cultural specialist, who is not specific to just one community development district, but represents the interest of everyone within the state, so to speak.
So do you think 3 representatives from He'eia Community Development District represent the thoughts of folks in Halawa, Kalihi, Kapolei, and Ewa? Is that what the idea was?
No, Representative, the 3 at-large members are not just for the He'eia Community Development District. They are for Kaka'ako, Kalailoa, He'eia, and any other district that the legislature may add under its CDA. So that's a much broader representation than just the district. There are 3, 2 small businesses, and I believe one who is a resident of the district. Those 3 represent specific districts. But in this case, the 3 at-large members and the cultural specialists represent the broader public.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much, testifiers. Next, we'll be looking at Senate Bill 225, SD1, HD1, relating to infrastructure improvement districts. First, we have testimony in support from Mary Alice Evans of the Office of Planning. Please proceed, Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and members. The Office of Planning supports SB 225, SD1, HD1, which would amend 201H to allow for subaccounts. We'll stand on our testimony and support. This is a TOD bill that we think will be very helpful in proceeding with building the infrastructure needed to start the vertical construction of new communities. Thank you. And Rodney Funakoshi is also here available, as well as, of course, HCDA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony from the Hawaii Interagency Council for Transit-Oriented Development. Both Mary Alice Evans and Denise Useri Matsubara are co-chairs. Whoever is presenting on behalf of the TOD Council, please proceed. It might be you again, Mary Alice.
Good morning. I see Janice Takahashi there. She may be representing Denise Iseri Matsubara from HHFDC. Janice, are you representing the TOD Council?
Hi, Mary Alice. I'm representing HHFDC. We had submitted separate testimony.
Yes, so I was going to ask Denise to speak next on behalf of HHFDC. Perhaps, Mary Alice, you can speak on behalf of the TOD Council.
Yes, I do. We also, the council itself is in strong support of SB 225. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry for the confusion. Next, we have testimony from Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation, Ms. Denise Iseri Matsubara, and Janice Takahashi. Janice, please proceed.
Hi, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm representing Denise this morning. HHFDC stands in strong support of this measure. I am available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. That's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Members, any questions? Representative Kobayashi.
Is this bill related to the prior bill about TODs? Or is it completely separate?
Mary Alice or Janice, would you like to address that question about how this bill relates to the previous bill?
I'd like to defer to Janice if I could.
Yes, Janice, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Representative Kobayashi, thank you for your question. This bill is specific to HHFDC, but it relates to the previous bill in that this is for regional infrastructure in TOD districts. So this bill will allow HHFDC to make assessments of projects that benefit specifically from the regional infrastructure that we finance. Again, it's related because of the more general TOD district. Thank you.
I'm concerned about the funding mechanism. In the prior bill, there was a funding section originally included. That originally included one person and $60,000, which is hardly much. That might help you simply designate what might be a TOD district, but it certainly won't help very much in putting in infrastructure. So it seems that to put in infrastructure, you need money up front for the planning that would go into creating improvement programs. And I'm not sure how that would come about given the lack of funding in these two bills.
Yes. In order for HHFDC to finance this, an appropriation to the dwelling unit revolving fund would have to be approved by the legislature. DERF does have some funding. We have made one loan at least to the County of Kauai for regional infrastructure. But again, yes, the funding is dependent upon appropriation.
So, okay, so the funding would be entirely separate from these two bills.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Yeah, that's a good point. It's really the funding in the dwelling unit revolving fund that would be the primary financing upfront. But this bill does allow HHFDC to assess against the transient-oriented development projects to be able to recoup that money to put back into the DERF. So that was the financing mechanism that this lays out.
Mhm.
Other questions, members, on this measure? Seeing none, let's move on to the next measure. Thank you, testifiers. Next, we're moving to HCR 103, authorizing the issuance of a perpetual non-exclusive easement covering portions of submerged lands in Mauna Loa, Oahu, for construction and maintenance of a rock groin to slow the rate of sediment deposition at the entrance channel of the Hawaii Kai Marina. We have testimony in support from DLNR, Mr. Russell Tsuji. Russell, please proceed.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Russell Tsuji for the department. This project, as we try to explain in our testimony, involves a rock groin at the Hawaii Kai Marina entrance, with the idea of preventing sediment from building up at the entrance channel, and also to actually keep some sand back at Port Lock Beach. This project was reviewed by OCCL and obtained their approval. I wanted to note, as noted in the second to the last paragraph of our testimony, that the appraisal amount for the groin came out at $400,000, and the association has disputed that. And so what that requires us to do is follow the process laid out in HRS 17117, which now requires the association to get its own appraiser, provide us an appraisal report. We send it over to our appraiser, and they'll try to see if they can arrive at a agreement on the value. If not, if they are not able to do so, then the parties will proceed to mediation. And if that is not successful, ultimately binding arbitration.
Thank you for that explanation. That's useful to understand how the appraisal process is conducted, especially if there is an objection when the grantee rejects the first appraised value. Okay, next we have written testimony and support from Beverly Little, who represents the Hawaii Kai Marina Community Association. And you can see that testimony in your packet, members, with a photograph, so you can see what that temporary sandbag groin looks like, and they want to replace it with a permanent rock groin. That's all the testimony that we've received on this measure. Members, any questions for DLNR? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next measure. Thank you. HCR 89, which is authorizing the issuance of a term non-exclusive easement covering portions of state submerged lands at Wailea, Maui for beach access stairway purposes. On this measure, we have testimony and support from DLNR. Mr. Russell Tsuji, please proceed.
This project, as noted as you described, Chair, is on Wailea, Maui. This is another project that OCCL did take a look at, and they had no objections to the granting of an easement. We are, in this case, limiting, because of the length of time it takes to actually document an easement, where we are requiring that the grantee obtain a revocable permit and pay rent during the interim of finally executing a formal easement, long-term easement, and to also post a removal bond. I don't have any. That's all I have. I don't have anything else to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Members, any questions? Representative Kobayashi.
Hi, for DLNR. In one of the whereases, it talks about the issuance of a 25-year term non-exclusive easement. How was 25 years determined? That seems much shorter than most terms that we have been looking at.
Okay. Yes, thank you for asking that, Representative. The statute allows the board to issue easements, you're correct, longer, up to 55. In fact, majority were 55, but the statute actually allows to 65 years. In consultation with OCCL, and because of the more recent times with the issues of sea level rise, climate change, etc., we decided for now to start implementing in 2021. We started to limit the terms when possible to 25 years. Now, sometimes the facts don't warrant that. You know, when we've had some old easements that had to come back for an amendment after 10 years, and they were granted under the longer term easements. So we didn't feel those were appropriate to shorten it and cut them off. But these are newer ones that we felt was appropriate, that they would be only allowed a shorter term of 25 years. If at the end of the 25 years, the situation would allow for further extension, then they will be free to ask that, you know, at the board at that time. But that's the reason for trying to limit the term. And we listened to a lot of the opposition over the years of some of the testimony in our shoreline easements, and a lot of it happened to be complaining about the length of term. And so we've been trying to address that as best as we can, Representative.
So this 25-year term is now the standard for all easements, or?
Well, that's our, yeah, that is the staff's recommendation to the land board when appropriate, when we feel the facts warrant that. Yes, as much as we can, we try to limit it to 25 years.
In this case, is the easement for something that was legally permitted or illegally permitted, not permitted?
Well, if you read the testimony, I believe the coastal walk or the walkway was permitted by the county, by a government, the county of Maui. And a lot of this in this Wailea area, my understanding, and I'm not, is that there is, over the years, you know, when these structures were built, it may not have been necessarily within the shoreline. They may have been outside the boundary of the private property, but not necessarily in the shoreline, which, what is the difference? The difference is a shoreline easement as compared to a land easement requires, the shoreline easement requires coming to the legislature and getting a legislative approval of the easement. A land easement would be just based on approval of the land board. And at the, what we do with all of our dispositions is report to the ledge annually, all of our dispositions. But other than that, it does not require an affirmative approval. Yeah. So that appears to be the case here. I don't know if I have my staff on board that can answer specifically about the legal or illegal structures, or Sam, if I have Sam Lemo here as well. You know, if anyone wants to chime in.
It sounds like to me, as I read it, I don't have the file in front of me, but it was permitted by the county. It's just, it ended up a slight encroachment in the process.
So it was originally a land easement approved by the county. Is that it?
It was a regulatory permit approved by the county.
Thank you.
Representative, I think they were trying to stay within their boundary, but oftentimes, unless you have it pinned and the markings out, they'll go beyond the boundary, and that's where you get, a lot of times you get encroachments. Now, because of the shoreline too, the issue is because now it's also within the shoreline. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? Seeing none, let's move on to the next measure. HCR 166, authorizing the amendment of a term non-exclusive easement covering a portion of state submerged lands at Kapa'a on Kauai for construction of a groin and for small-scale beach restoration and for use, repair, and maintenance of the improvements constructed thereon. We have testimony in support from Russell Tsuji at DLNR. Mr. Tsuji, please proceed.
Okay. I apologize. We did not prepare written testimony on this matter. One of the reasons is that we are actually going to the board on Thursday, this week, Thursday, to amend a prior approval. Yeah, so they did receive prior board approval for right of entry to go in and do some work, immediate work to fix a problem out there that actually OCCL reviewed and approved. What we're going in on Thursday is to, again, what I was explaining, because these, you know, if you go in on a right of entry and then later apply for an easement and get an easement, that easement process may take a while, and it might take years sometimes. So what we have asking the board on Thursday is to also implement or require a revocable permit, number one, immediately, to pay rent, number two, and also to post a removal bond in the event that the easement, for whatever reason, is not finalized, whether it's not obtaining legislative approval or not finalizing the easement, paying the appraised value, etc. The easement ultimately will be done by appraisal, as noted by statute, and will be at fair market value. I'm available for questions if you have any on this one as well.
Thank you very much. We also have available Kurt Yasutake with DLNR. Mr. Yasutake, would you like to say?
Division chair.
Available for questions.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Members, we've also received written testimony and support from a number of individuals who live right there on the property adjacent to the shoreline where this measure is focused. Patty Uden, Meyer Bornstein, Alan Uden, Raymond Jacobus, Linda Jacobus, Dial Henderson, and John Sorgenfrey, all in support. Members, any questions for DLNR? Representative Kobayashi.
Is this a project that, I I mean, this is a beach restoration project. Or I guess you call it a beach nourishment project. Is this
Small
a
scale.
project that might end up like Waikiki Beach, where every few decades or so, there's another nourishment project?
Sam, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, this is a rather complex case. Just real briefly, the AOAO there at Kauai Kailani, many years ago, there was a small groin structure that helped maintain a sandy beach in front of the facility. And they took the groin out because they were it was considered an encroachment. They took the groin out to get their shoreline certification so they could get a permit for some work on the building. The sand sort of went away after that because the groin structure was actually helping stabilize the sand fillet. They've had a horrific erosion problem there over the past few years. One of the worst on the east side, really threatening the AOAO building. So they hired an engineer, OceanNet, to come up with the plan. We've been giving them some temporary protection in the meantime, but one of the long-term solutions for them is to replace the groin. So that's what this is. It's an attempt to replace the groin that they removed, and then to add sand to basically refill that area with material. We took it through a permit process, and we reviewed it and determined that it was feasible. We didn't foresee any downdrift or updrift impacts, and so we went ahead and decided to give them the green light to go do it. And whether or not they'll have to bring in additional sand, representative, I think only time will tell.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay,
Can I ask
to you, Representative Morikawa.
Sam, this is a small beach area though, right?
Very small.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? If not, the chair has a question. You know, if we, either Russell or Sam, we just want to make sure that the TMK that is, well, first, I guess, this is an amendment to the easement. So we're not granting an easement. We're not authorizing the granting of an easement. We're authorizing the amendment. I just want to make sure that's correct.
My staff from Kauai is here, and maybe you can speak up. But Kurt, if I'm not mistaken, this is actually the first time it's coming before the board, before the legislature. So it is actually authorizing the easement. Is that correct, Kurt?
Yes, that's correct.
So yeah, I'm sorry about that, Chair. The title is reflecting.
So the title is incorrect. The title says authorizing the amendment of a term non-exclusive easement.
Yes.
In fact, it should be authorizing a term non-exclusive easement, should be.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the other question is, if you look at the, this is to, so do you need this also as authorizing not just the construction of the groin, but also the small scale beach restoration itself?
I think we may need that. Sam, you might want to comment on that because it is a temporary. It's actually going to be part of the easement, if I'm not mistaken.
I recommend you not go down that road and start trying to put easements around sand nourishment areas. I think we need to focus on the hard structures for the area of the easement because the sand is entirely ephemeral. It moves around and it's entirely a public resource.
Okay.
So I mean, that's a policy call, of course, on the part of the.
We can strike that.
Okay, so it's authorizing the issuance of a term non-exclusive easement covering a portion of lands for construction of a groin. But we don't need to have the rest of that title for small scale beach restoration or.
Yeah.
But we can keep for the use, repair
Absolutely.
and maintenance of the improvements constructed thereon.
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. And then the groin is seaward of a certain TMK that has been listed here. And that's all you need is just that in the be it resolved section. They only identify the TMK for construction of the groin. And that's all you really need. That's correct, right? So we're not dealing with the beach. So we don't need the other.
That's correct. Seaward of the private property. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions, members? Seeing none, thank you very much for that clarification. And I appreciate that this has been offered by the representative from the district and not by the department. So I appreciate you working with us to make sure we get this right. This does move on to CPC. So if needed, we can always try to do something there if you find something else. Okay, we'll move on, members, to HCR 163 and HR 139. Requesting the Board of Land and Natural Resources to enter into a long-term water lease with Waiole Valley Taro Hui for the Hui's existing use of water from Waiole Stream via direct negotiation upon completion of the environmental impact statement process. On this measure, we have testimony from DLNR from Mr. Russell Suji. Mr. Suji, please proceed.
Yes, Chair, members of the board, members of the committee, sorry. We stand in support and actually strong support of this resolution. What happened was we actually had some bills that would have authorized the department to issue a direct lease to the Waiole Valley Taro Hui, but the bills did not make it, and so we are still in support of this resolution, and we'll do our best to the extent permitted by law to allow for a direct negotiated lease. I have some of my staff available if you have any specific questions about that process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Will the representative from OHA please proceed?
Aloha, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Branco, and members of the committee. Leitani Peltier on behalf of the administration of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, testifying in support of HCR 163, HR 139. I see a few farmers of the farmers on this Zoom call too. So just a real quick, how's it, Chris, Joanne, Uncle Shorty? Wish we could catch up in person, but hey, at least you don't need to wake up at 3:30 in the morning to fly out to Honolulu. These farmers really exemplify the best of who we are as an island community. Maka'ainana, salt of the earth people who love their aina, love to farm, and who are just trying to pass on their knowledge and traditions to future generations. And so in a time where so many of us, including Native Hawaiians, can barely afford to remain in Hawaii, let us kako'o the efforts of this community and help them to build resilience and capacity so that they may continue to malama aina, malama mahalo. Mahalo to the Waiole Valley Taro farmers. Mahalo to the Environmental Law Clinic, Professor Sproat. Mahalo to the state and county agencies and staff who have supported this effort throughout the years. And mahalo nui to the committee for the opportunity to testify in this measure. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you very much. And I appreciate the shout out to our good friends, the Taro farmers. We have written testimony in support from the Office of the County Clerk, Council Services Division, and Kauai. Also written testimony in support from the Mayor of Kauai, Derek Kawakami. Testimony in support from the Honolulu Watershed Hui, from the National Tropical Botanical Garden. Many individuals in support, including John Aana, and we have Reed Yoshida here to testify in support. Mr. Yoshida, the floor is yours.
Aloha, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Branco, and honorable committee members. I'm Kapua Sproat, and I'm testifying today.
Yes, please.
Oh, no problem. So sorry to disappoint you, no Reed, but I'm here today on behalf of the Hui. And I'm actually a professor at UH Manoa's William S. Richardson School of Law, where I direct our Native Hawaiian Law Center, Kahuliao, and as well as our Native Hawaiian Rights and Environmental Law Clinics. These are courses that are offered to upper division law students where they get to experience practicing law while providing free legal assistance to communities with the greatest needs. And this semester, we're again working with the Waiʻoli Valley Tarahui on Kauai. This is actually the 4th semester that my students, fellows, and I have been supporting the farmers. Their situation is detailed in extensive written testimony, as well as a testimony of the individual farmers upon which we stand. And the bottom line here is that the Hui is a collective of about a dozen small family farmers, many of whom are Native Hawaiian, some of whom were born on the farms that they now tend. Their lifeways were devastated by the 2018 floods that ravaged, and now what seems to be one continual rain event that continues to ravage Kauai's North Shore. In 2018, our disaster recovery efforts revealed that the Farmers Native Hawaiian irrigation system that takes water from Waiʻoli Stream and has done so for centuries was on conservation land and would now be subject to permitting and other requirements, including the water licensing provision. And so over the last 2 years, the farmers, with the assistance of my clinics, have been working diligently to comply with a ton of complex requirements. Over the course of 2 years, 33 students and 4 attorneys have spent thousands of hours supporting the farmers in this endeavor. My students playfully refer to the Hui as a legal unicorn because their situation and legal status are unique and warrant special treatment. Their use and stewardship of this area is ancient. Research documented by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and actually that's attached to their testimony today, dated the system to the 15th century. And I have a picture from the 1890s of the farmers' awai and exactly where they are today. This system has been in place before Hawaii was a state, before we had a conservation zone, before laws like 171 existed. In addition, their water use is pono. It's in stream, it's in watershed, it's non-polluting. These are public trust purposes. So the farmers have a pertinent, riparian, and traditional customary Native Hawaiian rights. Despite all of this, these humble farmers have dutifully sought to comply with the full letter of the law. And I'm here today to ask you to please pass out these resolutions and allow the farmers to directly negotiate with DLNR after they have fulfilled all of the necessary requirements. As Russell mentioned, we've been working very closely with staff there, and they're supportive of these resos. The governor was in town on Thursday, and he met with these farmers and acknowledged the challenges and expressed his support for an expedited process. So I'm happy to delve into the details or answer any questions that you may have. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Professor Sproat. Always good to see you.
Thank you.
We have written testimony and support from Jessica Fu, Honolulu Hawaiian Civic Club, Jody Malinowski, Sierra Club, Shay Kamaka'ala, Hawaiian Islands Land Trust, and a number of individuals, some of whom are here today. So may I call for testimony, Ka'ulu Lu'uvai. Please proceed.
Yes. Aloha, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, members of the committee. My name is Ka'ulu Lu'uvai. I am a third-year student at the William S. Richardson School of Law, and I strongly support both HR 139 and HCR 163. I've been working with the Hui, the Waiʻoli Valley Taro Hui, for 2 semesters now in both the Environmental Law Clinic and the Native Hawaiian Rights Clinic with Professor Sproat. And while you will hear from some of the farmers this morning, I just want to urge you folks to take a closer look at the written testimony, because so many of the farmers from the Hui submitted written testimony and really wish they could be here, but they cannot because of all of the challenges they're facing right now. You know, you may have heard they experienced flooding in February, and now they have a landslide. And so there are so many obstacles, and they can't really make the time to testify live and be here with you folks. So they're trying their best by submitting written testimony. And hopefully when you review their testimony, you'll see all the challenges and understand what they're facing right now and why these resolutions would mean so much to them if they were passed out, and why they really need this help from you folks today. And the last thing I would like to conclude with is to note that the title of this resolution, it might be best suited to be changed to the Chapter 343 process, because right now it says environmental impact assessment process, but that may have different connotations because the farmers are in the midst of completing a draft environmental assessment. And so changing the title of this bill to reflect Chapter 343 rather than environmental impact assessment might be more accurate and might create less expectations to actually complete an environmental impact statement, given their use is likely, and all of the processes they're going through will likely be fulfilled by the draft environmental assessment. So thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm here for any questions, but I will probably defer to my professor if anything. So mahalo.
Mahalo. And I want to acknowledge the individuals who sent in written testimony, because they may be viewing the video at a later time. These are all in support. MJ McDonald, Kevin Chang, Malia Makanani, Kilia Purdy Avelino, Van Warren, Rachel James, Mahana Vaughn, Uilani Tanigawa Lum, Corey Palencia, Emily, and we have providing oral testimony, Joanne Kaona. Joanne, please proceed.
Aloha, Chair Tarnas and committee members. Mahalo for this opportunity to testify in support of these resolutions. My name is Joanne Kaona. I'm the secretary of the Waioli Valley Cerro Hui, and also help my dad, who's here, Clarence Shorty Kaona Farm Kalo in Waioli Valley. I also work at Waipaw Foundation, where I get to work with the keiki, teach them about Aloha Aina and sustainability. And also we have Poi Day every Thursday, where we make poi with community volunteers and we distribute it throughout the island. And our main goal of this is just to keep poi affordable and on as many tables across the island as possible. We even have kapuna prices, little to no cost. And a lot of the kalo that we use for this poi is grown by Waioli Valley cattle farmers, including my dad. And for us, farming kalo defines our ohana, who we are, and it's one way that we contribute to our community. In 2018, we were hit hard by the floods, and we're still recovering physically and dealing with all these new legal requirements. So there's a lot of challenges, even including the landslide that just happened last week. It cut off access from some of the farmers to their lo'is, including my dad, which I was a little worried about because ever since I can remember every day, my dad goes to the taro patch just to check on the farm, check on the situation. And, it's really more of not a job, but a lifestyle. And I think that commitment to the lifestyle is what creates such a strong connection to the land and the natural resources that we're so dependent upon, like water. So that's why these resolutions are so important to us, because millionaires are moving here. If we were to have to go up against them for our water, we wouldn't have a chance. So that's why it's important to us. I think that, these resolutions will allow our hui to continue to feed our community and to pass on this tradition of kalo farming. Mahalo.
Mahalo nui. Your family is very famous, and I appreciate that you're testifying here. Before you turn off your camera, let me ask your father, Shorty, to provide his testimony next. Please proceed, sir.
Aloha, my name is Clarence Haley Kaona. I'm 85 years old. I was farming taro since I was 5 years old with my dad. And when my dad passed away, I continued to take over his farm and has been farming since then till now with my daughter, Joanne. I support this resolution very, very much. Thank you.
Mahalo. I really appreciate you two taking the time to testify before us today. Next, we have testimony in support from Chris Kobayashi. Chris, the floor is yours. Please proceed.
Excuse me. Aloha representatives, and mahalo for this opportunity My name is Chris Kobayashi. I grow kalo in Waioli and also am a member of Waioli Valley Taro Hui. As a third generation farmer for me and so many others in our hui, this is not a job. It's a way of life. It's a commitment and a kuleana that we practice. And the 2018 floods, as you know, really set us back. It destroyed our native Hawaiian irrigation system and a lot of damage to our farms and some of us to our homes. So just recently in February and again in March, we had major rain events that breached our entire Auai system and fully submerged and flooded our lo'i. There was no water coming down our Auai after all the runoff disappeared. And so, you know, after every big rain and flooding event, we have to respond immediately, assess the damages and fix what we can to get the water flowing again. In the next few months to a year, everyone who loves kalo and poi will probably see the effects of this flooding. In Waioli, we definitely see that climate is changing to bigger and more frequent rain events. So after 3 to 5 generations that all of our families, our kalo farmer families have maintained this whole water system, we were told that our mano, our diversion from Waioli stream was in the conservation zone. And so we had to obtain exemptions, permits, rights of entry, a lease and research and write big studies and coordinate with the county, state and different agency, as well as fly to Oahu to testify at the legislature and BLNR. We are simply farmers and we just want to grow kalo, but now we know that in order to farm, you also need to be a lawyer and have other skills to do all this that takes a lot of time away from our farming. So we really have been extremely fortunate and grateful to have Kapua Sprout and her clinicians and her team of lawyers to help us navigate through this cumbersome, lengthy process that we have no idea how to do. And it has taken a lot of work and time, I know they have done for us. But so now we want to ask you for your help too, representatives. Please vote to allow our hui to directly negotiate with BLNR. And in my lifetime, I've lived here all my life here. I've seen the changes in our community. It's a community of deep contrast. We have huge resort landowners, absentee owners, many vacation rentals, skyrocketing property taxes, and many new faces, and we cannot compete at that level at an auction. Our kalo farming community is just a few handfuls of us. And I don't want to see this water system or culture of growing kalo be abandoned now or in the future, just because farmers have no funds or no time for all this legal stuff. Kalo farmers have taken care of this system because we need this resource to grow kalo. And so many others benefit in the meantime. But it is like our hui is part of this tradition, this Waioli kalo lineage that has been going on in Waioli for hundreds of years. So we carry on this tradition, this legacy, and we want this traditional culture to continue for generations to come. So mahalo for your time and aloha. And also want to give a big mahalo to Representative Nadine Nakamura for introducing the rezos and for being so supportive of us. So mahalo.
Mahalo. Thank you very much for that testimony. We've received members a written testimony from other individuals whom I list: Kapua Chandler, Kaisen Carrillo, Sierra Lynn Stone, Dwight Morishige, Conrad Inanad, Lillian Watari, Bobby Watari, Wayne Tanji, Mahina Tutur, Dimitri Rivera, Nathaniel Tin Wong, Donna Santos, Dominique, Nicholas Ernst, Ashley Kaono, and Jim Kauluvehi Aana. That's all the testimony that we have before us today. Questions, members? I'll defer to our representative from Kauai first.
Thank you,
Representative
Chair.
Morikawa.
Thank you. I have maybe just a real quick question, but I also want to acknowledge the fact that in these new times of doing things through Zoom, I think it's just great to see, you know, Uncle Shorty and Chris, that you can be here with us and not have to fly over. I think that's really good. Just a shout out to Uncle Shorty, aloha. Ken and I send you our best. But you know, Chris, when you talk about Auai systems, what do you mean by that? Does the another diversion come out to the Auai from the main river?
Can you repeat that? Sorry, I had to unmute.
So I heard you say Hawaii systems. How
Yeah,
does that work?
It starts from way up Mauka, up in the mountains, and then we have a diversion that's called a Mano or Manawai. It's a breakaway dam, and then it comes down to a Po'owai, which is another feeder that feeds it into our Auai system. So there's a long ditch or Auai system that comes down along the mountains, and then it comes down into our Lo'i.
Oh, good. I see Russell nodding his head. So thank you for that explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Ganadin, you have a question?
For Professor Sproat.
Yes,
morning.
Representative Gannon, good morning.
Good morning. Is this a template? So considering all the testimony that we've heard today, the traditional use and stewardship of the land, the connection of Kalo to the religion and identity of Native Hawaiians, would this streamlining process be helpful for other communities across the archipelago? Noting that this committee and the legislature is confronted with and presented with streamlining opportunities for all kinds of business and corporate development. So would this be helpful for other communities?
Mahalo for that question, Representative Ganadin. I think in many ways, yes, the Waiole Valley Tarahui and the work that they've done exemplifies, I would say two things. They have been model citizens in the way that they have complied with these processes, which I will say, as an attorney who's worked in this area for many years, is incredibly burdensome and difficult for farmers, regular people, to be able to navigate without the assistance of an attorney. And actually in House Bill 1015, we worked very closely with Ian and in Hirakawa and the folks at DLNR, and there's actually an exemption included, what would have been Section H, that would have exempted the farmers or other farmers like this for the traditional and customary Native Hawaiian practice of kalo farming altogether. And respectfully, I think that process would be preferable, that the farmers should not be made to have to comply with this process at all. While it has been an incredible learning opportunity for our students, it's been transformational for them to be able to work with the farmers. We are one law clinic, and with a handful of students that can only take on one project a semester. And so there may be many others like this, many other folks who need this help. And so I would respectfully request that, yes, in the future, there should be an exemption for traditional customary Native Hawaiian practices from these requirements. And in the absence of that, I would gratefully accept the resolutions which would allow them to directly negotiate. But I do agree, and there are other templates, such as the expedited process for the restoration of Loko'i'a, for example. There is an expedited process for that, and there could similarly be one for Lo'ikalo restoration.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. I think I heard 3 years. Yourself and other pro bono attorneys have been working on this, as well as numerous students. If you had to just guess, about how much in legal fees would that have been had you charged?
That's a great question. A very conservative estimate is over 2 years, 33 students and 4 attorneys. So about 3,000 hours worth of time. And there are different billing rates for folks with different experience. So for attorneys with a lot of experience, that could be several $100s an hour. Even for a law student, you would bill out their time depending on the kind of work for 75, 120, $100 or so an hour. So you can do the math, but it's a significant investment of resources. And so again, we're grateful and privileged to be able to work with the farmers. I mean, for me, this has been one of the most gratifying experiences to be able to put my legal experience to work for my own community. But I worry about other communities and other practitioners having to kind of shoot this gauntlet. It's incredibly difficult. And so an exemption or some other expedited process, I think, would be beneficial for other people to come. Mahalo.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. Any other questions for our testifiers today? If Representative Kobayashi.
For DLNR, does DLNR have the right to enter into direct negotiations without this resolution?
Well, Representative, as I was indicating earlier, we had a a bill, two bills that did not make it, but within that bill, there was going to be a provision that would have allowed for direct negotiation. So it would have been really clear. Right now, I will say this, and I can't really speak with my lawyer hat on because I'm working for the administration right now, but they are a qualified nonprofit. And we have looked at that statute of being a basis for direct negotiation. However, generally we've been told from that because the water leasing statute is really specific, when you have a general statute about nonprofits versus a specific water leasing statute, we're duty bound to follow that statute. And in that statute, it doesn't have that ability. And that's what we're trying to amend earlier in this session, but it did not make it. So this resolution came about by Representative Nakamura. We support it. And we will try within, as I said earlier, within the permitted by law, we'll try to do our best to have a directly negotiated lease process for this group.
So direct negotiations right now are not allowed, but somehow you intend to go to direct negotiations or would like to go to direct negotiations.
What we'll probably have to do is really do a deep dive into the statutory history of the two sections and try to reconcile them and see if we could probably, if the Attorney Generals would be willing to stand behind a directly negotiated lease in favor of the whole under current law.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions for our testifiers?
Actually, may I respond to that really briefly?
Of course, Professor Sprout, please go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, Representative Kobayashi, that there is a section under 17158C that does allow direct negotiation for water leases that are non-consumptive, non-polluting, various other uses. And so we seek to take advantage of that particular exception. It requires approval both by the governor as well as a concurrent resolution of the legislature. And so that is a specific provision that we are requesting authorization for under this resolution, if that more directly answers your question. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I just wanted to provide the specific.
No, it's very, very important. And so you cited 17158C.
Yes.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Any other questions, members? If not, we'll move on. And I want to say mahalo nui to all the testifiers on HCR 163 and HR 139. Let's move on to the next measure, HCR 159, HR 135, strongly urging the DLNR to work with the International Dialogue on Underwater Munitions International Scientific and Technology Advisory Board on Underwater Munitions to seek and secure federal funding for the non-destructive disposal of thousands of tons of underwater munitions dumped, lost, or abandoned in Hawaiian waters. On this matter, we have testimony and support from DLNR Aquatic Resources. Mr. Brian Nielsen, the floor is yours. Please proceed.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. We stand on our written testimony in support of this resolution, available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have written testimony and support from Laurel Breyer, Hawaii Women's Caucus. And we have with us today James Porter from the International Dialogue on Underwater Munitions. Mr. Porter, please proceed.
Yes, thank you very much. I am Dr. James W. Porter, a professor of ecology and marine sciences at the University of Georgia. I'm also a member of IDEM's International Scientific and Technical Advisory Board. I'm an expert on the effects of underwater munitions on coral reefs. I have worked with IDEM in Hawaii and in Puerto Rico on coral reefs all over the world. In this brief statement, I will make 3 points supporting strongly Resolution HCR 159 and HR 135 to clean up and remove munitions from Hawaiian waters. Point number 1, in my previous studies in Puerto Rico, all corals in close proximity to underwater bombs were sick. Some corals had taken up as much as 800 parts per million of the explosive TNT. Corals near the munitions were bleached. In this study, no coral distant from the munitions were bleached. So yes, high temperatures can cause coral bleaching, and certainly you in Hawaii know this, but so can munitions. Point number 2, coral reef organisms in proximity to underwater munitions were found to have up to 8 carcinogenic compounds inside them. These compounds were derived exclusively from munitions. They are not naturally occurring compounds. Some of these toxins were more than 100,000 times above EPA's allowable limit. And finally, point number 3, these toxins had spread throughout the coral reef ecosystem. They were in the fish, the sea urchins, and the corals on the reef. Pollution from underwater bombs, which are point source emitters of these toxins, had spread throughout the reef and has become an ecosystem-wide problem. In conclusion, I recommend that you pass these resolutions because if you get rid of the bombs, you will get rid of the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Porter. We've received written testimony and support from Karen Porter, also with the International Dialogue on Underwater Munitions. We have testimony from Mr. Terence Long, also with the International Dialogue on Underwater Munitions. Mr. Long, if you're available, please proceed.
Aloha and good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Terence Long. I'm in strong support of HRC 159. My background is I'm a bomb disposal expert and a deminer, and I've been doing that from early in my military career in the Canadian military. And then I left the military in '89 to do capacity building for the United Nations, where I would go into different countries and support local NGOs, local initiatives, and outreach programs to build capacities within that country to clean up the landmines. A lot of my work over the years, after working on the landmines in 1996, after we received a treaty, I started to look at the underwater munitions. When I started to look at them, I was shocked at the amount of munitions that I was finding. Everywhere I looked, I started to find munitions. The more I looked, the more I started to find. And what I ended up doing was finding out that munitions are in every sea and ocean around the globe. A lot of small island states and islands themselves are affected by the munitions, where a lot of other larger industrialized countries would actually dump their munitions in smaller countries and in near island states. So what we ended up with is a legacy of underwater munitions dating from the 1910s up until the mid-1970s to when they stopped dumping. Now we have that legacy of underwater munitions, and in most cases, the military is asked to look after it. But this is not a military problem. This is an environmental problem. It's a legacy munitions, not operational munitions. So what we need is a foundation, a charitable foundation like the International Dialogue on Underwater Munitions and our International Science Board that consists of 16 scientists from 10 different countries, that we all act in our own capacity, where we bring all our expertise together. So we look at a problem, we try to develop a solution on it. So almost in every case, the solution is support the local people and build capacity, transfer skills and knowledge and training. And we do that now. 2 years ago, we had a summer school here in Canada where we took 20 students from as far away as Russia. We basically taught them all the different aspects on surveying the munitions, the different types of science they had to do to investigate them. And then we sent them back to their countries and their institutes to start transferring some of those skills back. So to me, this is a great opportunity for Hawaii. It's an opportunity to start training young people and even old people on underwater vehicles, on remotely operated vehicles. You need small specialized vessels to be able to recover these munitions and dispose of them. One of the greatest threats today is the contractors and the militaries. When they want to get rid of these munitions, they blow them up in the water. All they're doing is adding more toxins. And because a lot of these munitions are waterlogged, they don't blow up and ignite and burn all the toxins in it. What it does is throw the toxins up into the water column.
it throws it into the seabed. And if it's shallow enough, it throws it back into the air, and sometimes it ends up on the shorelines and rivers and places like this. So to me, one of the greatest things you can do for the environment is simply take the munitions off the coral reefs, bring them into the shoreline, or put them on a small barge and environmentally friendly remediate those munitions.
Thank you. If you could summarize, that'd be great.
I think this is a great opportunity for HRC 159, and I strongly support it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Long. I appreciate that. We have written testimony support from Cheryl B., from Rhonda, Alex Suchen, and Christine Ward Page, Andrea Quinn, and we have, if he's available, Valentine Zengung. Are you available? If so, the floor is yours. Valentine.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Thanks, the Vice Chair and the committee members. I am a professor at the University of Georgia and a fellow of the National Academy of Inventors. I have developed multiple technologies that are used to destroy explosives, both on land and in sea. So I come to you today to state that there currently exist technologies, environmentally friendly technologies that would destroy explosives without polluting the ocean or without polluting lands. It is on this basis that I have submitted written testimony, and I would like to restate that I favor resolutions HR 135 and HCR 159. Thank you for your time, and I urge the committee to strongly consider the fact that solutions do exist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your written testimony, and I appreciate the written testimony and oral testimony from all the testifiers today. It's very helpful background information, supporting documents and everything. That's all the testimony that we've received on these measures. Members, any questions for our testifiers? If not, thank you. That was very comprehensive. Thank you to the testifiers on those measures. We'll move on now to the next measure, HCR 96. Urging the Department of Facility Maintenance of the City and County of Honolulu, in conjunction with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Department of Environmental Services of City and County of Honolulu, to immediately and regularly clean the drainage canals and streams in Kaneohe and Kailua and develop recommended cleaning schedules for drainage canals and streams. Members, we have received written testimony and support from 7 individuals: Pat Lee, Lilia Howe, Susan Takayama, Bill Hicks, Lavani Lipton, Cindy Abe, and Moana Whelan. You have no one here to provide oral testimony, so I would refer you to those written testimony for further information. Now, let's move on to the next measure, HR 81. Members, we are actually, we agendized a proposed HD1 for HR 81. And the title for that is urging the Department of Facility Maintenance of the City and County of Honolulu, in conjunction with the requesting the City and County of Honolulu to develop a comprehensive plan to drain and clear streams and canals that flow in residential areas in Waihole and other Ko'olauloa communities. We have received testimony on this proposed HD1 of HR 81 from written testimony from Mufi Hanneman, Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association, from Bronze Fono Imoana, from Joe Wilson, from Derek Presley, and Tavita Kaili, all in support. And we also received some suggested amendments from the original introducer of this, our member Representative Matayoshi, which I'll share with you during decision making. That's all the testimony we've received on HR 81, proposed HD1. We'll move on to the next measure, HCR 147, requesting that a working group be convened to make recommendations on flood mitigation at the intersection of East Manoa Road and Oahu Avenue.
You can tell that there is some flooding that happened recently. All these measures relating to it are a result of that. HCR 147, we have received 17 letters of support from individuals: Jerry Lamb, Catherine Nakamura, Patrice Choi, Dave Watasi, Winona Holmes, Grant Takumi, Benjamin Anchetta, Sarah Chinen, Pat Watson, Christine Otaza'a, Sydney Lynch, Bruce Lum, Elton Fukumoto, Charlene Chun Lum, Ann Kobayashi, Audrey Lee, and Cliff and Mary DeVries. And I also received an email from our former colleague, Calvin Say, in support, all in support. So members, I refer you to those written testimony for further information. Let's move on to the next measure, HCR 129 and HR 111, convening a working group to discuss the future development plans in Kaka'ako Makai. We have received testimony from different organizations and individuals. First up, we have testimony in opposition from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, Chair Carmen Hulu Lindsay. Chair Lindsay, the floor is yours. Please proceed. Oh, sorry. Chair Lindsay is not available today. Anyone else from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs to present testimony on her behalf? If not, is there, if there is, please speak up. I guess not. Okay, so members, I refer you. Stephanie Wong.
Here I am. Sorry, can't get off. Can't get you.
Chair Lindsay, is that you?
It's me, yes,
Okay.
Representative.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Aloha, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, and members of the committee. My name is Hulu Lindsay, and I am the chair of the OHA Board of Trustees. OHA submitted a written testimony in strong opposition to HCR 129. I would like to take this opportunity to summarize a few key points from our testimony. First, this resolution represents an intrusion by the legislature into the OHA Board of Trustees' exclusive authority under the state constitution to manage the Native Hawaiian people's share of the public land trust, and essentially seeks to undo a major settlement between Native Hawaiians and the state of Hawaii over the state's use of our people's stolen ancestral lands. As a matter of Native Hawaiian self-determination, and in light of the state's own repeated promise to seek reconciliation with the Native Hawaiian people, we cannot support this resolution. Secondly, I want to emphasize a major point regarding OHA's Kaka'ako Makai lands, which is this: these are not public lands. These are Native Hawaiian trust lands. These lands were transferred to OHA in 2012 with the express understanding that they would become trust lands, which OHA has the exclusive authority under the Constitution to manage and use for the benefit of Native Hawaiians. There is a serious falsehood circulating in the larger community that these lands are somehow still public lands that should be used to preserve view planes and other public interests, other than bettering the conditions of Native Hawaiians. This resolution would perpetuate this mistaken assumption by allowing the legislature, other state agencies, and even a community group with no interest in helping the Native Hawaiian people to determine what OHA should do with these Native Hawaiian trust lands. Finally, we are not interested in discussing a land exchange that will set us back to square one, delay Native Hawaiians justice for another decade or longer, and possibly put us at odds with another community over what we want to do with our lands on behalf of our people. OHA's intent moving forward is to finish our planning efforts to fulfill our fiduciary duty to develop these Kaka'ako Makai lands in such a manner that meets the needs of our Native Hawaiian beneficiaries across the Pai'aina. We hope that our progress over the next year will demonstrate that a Native Hawaiian vision for Kaka'ako Makai is something that the entire state can support. For these reasons, we strongly urge the committee to hold House Concurrent Resolution 129. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Appreciate your testimony, Chair Lindsay. Next, we have testimony and support from Hawaii Community Development Authority, Deepak Yupane. Deepak, if you're available, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Branco, and members of the committee. HCD appreciates being included in this working group to discuss the future development plans in Kaka'ako Makai. And again, thank you for the opportunity to provide support for this resolution.
Thank you. We've received written testimony in support from Joyce Kamimoto. And we have before us today the Iwami family. Representative of the Iwami family, the floor is yours. Please proceed. Is there a representative from the Iwami family?
Yes.
Please proceed. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, Chair Tarnas and rest of the members. Thank you for this opportunity to testify, because it is a very important issue in our eyes. I represent Friends of Kiwalos. We are a community group dedicated to protect, preserve, and malama the Kiwalo Basin Park and the surrounding shoreline areas, including Kaka'ako Makai area and Olomona Park. We feel that it's very important that we come to the table, to discuss alternatives for OHA and the people on how to develop this land. As you all know, we were able to stop the bill that would have gotten a lot of high rises in the area, which will cut off our access and go against our mission. I think it's very important that we preserve all the oceanfront lands in the entire state, what little we have left, so that the people of Hawaii, who as island people use every day, like I've been surfing the area for 50 years, and it has made me the person I am today. And I can speak for thousands who use the ocean to relieve stress and all those, pressures of society. It's our little piece of the country and the city, because we cannot afford oceanfront property. We go there to the parks and use it. Well, anyway, for 16 years, Friends of Kiwalos and the community have been fighting for this land. And it started in 2005 and 6, when the state wanted to sell the land to Alexander and Baldwin and build high rises there and all kind of commercial activity, which would have gone against our mission. So we decided to stand up, and long story short, due to the public opposition, a law got created to protect this land. The law says there's a ban on all residential development in Kaka'ako Makai, and there's a ban on selling any public land in Kaka'ako Makai. That law has been standing strong all this time, protecting this land. Yeah, then in 2012, the OHA and the state they both decided that they would get the land to satisfy the ceded land issue. So now from the state, the ownership turned over to OHA. And they tried 3 times, including this year, to overturn the prohibition on residential.
Thank you, Mr. Iwami. If you could summarize your supportive testimony, that'd be great.
Okay, to summarize, I just want to say it's very important that this group get convened so that we can find a solution and not have to battle this again next year. And basically, that's what I want to say.
Mahalo. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
Mr. Iwami.
Okay.
We have received written testimony and support from Free Access Coalition, John and Rita Shockley. And we have testimony and support from the Oahu Island Parks Conservancy, Michelle Matson. We have testimony and support from the Kaka'ako-Makai Community Planning Advisory Council, Wayne Takamine. Mr. Takamine, if you're available, the floor is yours. Please proceed.
Hi, I'm available. I can't, let's see. Aloha, my name is Wayne Takamine, and I am the chair of the Kaka'ako-Makai Community Planning Advisory Council and also a founding member of that advisory working group. We generated the Kaka'ako-Makai Conceptual Master Plan. And in 2010, it was unanimously approved by the HCDA board, and it includes visions and guiding principles. I know Ron Iwami from 2005 when we first started to look at the A and B RFP with HCDA. And then we had laws created to prohibit residential development in Kaka'ako-Makai and also the sale of state land in Kaka'ako. So as part of that year, there was HCR 30 that required the HCDA to create a citizens advisory group. And we became that citizens advisory group that worked with HCDA to create this Kaka'ako-Makai Conceptual Master Plan that was approved in, I believe, 2011. After that, in 2012, OHA, there was a bill to transfer the lands in Kaka'ako-Makai to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, which is a state agency. And they approved it. And they approached us and we showed them our Kaka'ako-Makai Conceptual Master Plan and vision and guiding principles. And they said, we like that. In fact, in a newspaper article, they had that stated that they had intended to go forward with the Conceptual Master Plan and the vision and guiding principles. But also in 2012, they wanted to build some high rises, which was still prohibited by HCD, by the laws governing HCDA in 2005. So that was not, it did not pass. Then they came back again in 2014, and again, that law did not pass. And now they're back again in 2021, and the law does not pass. So now these concepts, you know, they're based on getting people to come to Kaka'ako-Makai. So we want to create a synergy of different types of exhibitions and programs. One of them is a permanent fish and farmers market.
Thank you. If you could summarize your testimony and support, that'd be great.
Okay, the Conceptual Master Plan is a very complex plan. It's not easy, like we're going to build all of these buildings and sell condominiums. Each project going to take a leader to develop that project because it's a business. It's not like we're going to throw up a building and we're gonna go and rent, lease, or sell these condominiums. It takes time. It takes effort. It's a community thing that can actually unify the Hawaiian community, give them some goals to go searching for instead of just watching people, oh, wow, that's a nice building. All of our Hawaiian money going to come from these big buildings. We're trying to get, yeah, we want to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your impassioned testimony and support and your hard work over the years.
Thank you so much.
We have received a written testimony providing comments from Lei Ho and written testimony and support from the following individuals: David Chi, Ethan Porter, Mio Chi, Dyson Chi, Yvonne Giese, Marvin Yoshizumi, Marvin Heskett, Luciano, Leimomi Khan, Christy Martin, Doreen Yarson, Todd Yoshizawa, and Jay Kadawaki. Members, that's all the testimony that we have received on these two measures. HCR 129 and HR 111. Any questions of our testifiers? Vice Chair Branco, please proceed.
Mr. Niupane. Sir, could you tell me the difference between trust lands and public lands?
Vice Chair, I think I have to plead ignorance. I'm not familiar with the definition of trust land and public land.
And same question, but to Chair Hulu Lindsay, please.
Chair Lindsay, if you're available, we have a question.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't have
fine.
my.
Rep, Vice Chair Branco had a question. Maybe you could repeat the question, Vice Chair?
Sure. Could you tell me the difference between trust lands and public lands, please?
The trust lands were given to us as payment for the back revenues derived from our public land trust. And when it is transferred to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, it becomes money for us. Now, prior to it being transferred to us, it was state lands. So there's a major difference. When it is in the possession as one of our assets, the Board of Trustees has the sole responsibility to make decisions on those lands.
Thank you, Chair. One more question, if I may.
Yes, please.
To Mr. Iwami, please. Mr. Iwami, you there?
Yes. Okay.
Here
I am.
I wanted to ask about your perspective on balancing community as well as the ability to help Native Hawaiians. And so my question to you is, how, in your viewpoint, in your lens, do you balance, keeping your community as well as the possibility that these lands could generate significant amount of income to help Native Hawaiians?
Well, I think that's a good question. I mean, it's a hard question because if you're going to build residential 400 feet tall and sell it, it's like, to me, not a balance. You need to stick to the Kakaako master plan, which has maybe will not make as much income on a short term, but it will provide for the people of Hawaii, Hawaiians and non-Hawaiians alike, for generations to come. I think that's the way to develop this last public oceanfront land. And it's hard to balance what OHA wants to do and what basically the broader community wants to do. I understand their reasoning, but there's also a lot of people that want to keep that open space and accessible. So it's a very difficult question to answer. I hope we can find a solution by convening this working group.
And then just a follow-up, if to the Kakaako master plan, if OHA does not develop residential, but developed in some other way, commercial, would you folks still be in opposition to that?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Other questions? Representative Kobayashi.
For OHA Chair Lindsay, you said that Office of Hawaiian Affairs has, quote, the sole, unquote, responsibility for developing the Kakaako Makai lands. By that, do you mean that Office of Hawaiian Affairs can do anything in terms of zoning, height, density? That is, on zoning, could you declare that to be hotel zoning or do any construction regardless of density or height?
No, Representative, I did not mean that too. I know that we need to go through the HCDA and live with our present zoning, which is multiple use, which allows residential. But because of the restriction put on those lots, we can't do residential, and that is the purpose of our bill that was killed by the speaker. However, we know that the height needs approval as well. And we also know that there's the different zonings and densities that will be required of us by the Hawaii HCDA. So we do need to comply with those zoning rules.
Thank you. I didn't know how far you meant. Said the word sold. Unquote.
No. I meant as a decision of our vision. That's the decision that the trustees have.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Ganadin, please proceed.
Chair Lindsay, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Is the Office of Foreign Affairs interested in cutting off the public's constitutional access to the sea? For example, the beach breaks at Flies, Point Panic, Cavallos, the old stairwell behind John Dominus, which hundreds of people use every week. Is the Office of Foreign Affairs interested in cutting that off?
Absolutely not. Representative, you know that the Hawaiian people are an ocean people. And if anybody is going to protect the rights of everybody to access the sea, it's going to be the Hawaiians. So if anything, we may improve upon the parking lot, improve upon the access, but never would we close off any access. The portions by the frontage of the commercial lots, we're not allowed to access through there anyway by the Department of Transportation. So where we have access now is going to remain there, and all peoples can come and use that area as they do now for surfing.
And one more question.
Yes.
To Chair Lindsay, is this an issue which we're going to see play out throughout the state regarding Native Hawaiians' rights for self-determination in relation to the state?
Well, I'd like to think that we will be acknowledged for our desire to practice our self-determination. And of course, it will be applicable throughout the state. It's a way of life for the Hawaiian people. And I think they have the right to practice it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. Any other questions, members? Back for a second time, Vice Chair Bronco.
To the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, just pardon my ignorance, but could you just share with us why the state had transferred these lands to Oahu?
They transferred it to us because they could not pay us for the $200 million they owed us in our share of the public land trust monies. Apparently for 20 years, and this is prior to my being a trustee, but history has told me that for 20 years there was negotiations between the state and OHA without success. The legislature kept turning down different choices. And finally, in 2012, when these 30 acres were offered to OHA and presented to the legislature, we were successful. And it was very hard on us to take the lands without the entitlements of, let's say, the residential as well as the height. But we were told and encouraged that we could come back later and ask. So we've come back in 2014. We've come back now, And apparently our legislature is still not open to allowing us to practice our right for the best use of kaka'ako makai.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. Any other questions, members? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next measure. I want to thank the testifiers very much. Chair Lindsay, thank you for spending the time with us and answering these questions. And all the other members of the community, thank you for your testimony as well. Let's move on to HCR 102 HR 85. Requesting the Legislative Reference Bureau in collaboration with the Department of Land and Natural Resources and University of Hawaii to develop a plan to establish a state geological survey in Hawaii. Members, we have received written testimony with comments from the Legislative Reference Bureau, and we have testimony providing comments from the Office of Planning. Mary Alice Evans, if you're available, please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Tarnas and members of the committee. My name is Arthur Buto. I'm the GIS Program Manager for the statewide GIS program in the Office of Planning. Mary Alice had to attend another board meeting, so her apologies for not being able to attend. The Office of Planning stands on its testimony in support of this resolution and offered amendments, including substituting the Office of Planning for the Legislative Reference Bureau to lead the study, including some additional agencies, HIEMA, Department of Transportation, the county planning departments and county emergency management agencies in the study group, and asking, suggesting that we extend the due date for the report to 20 days prior to the session 2023. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Buto, appreciate it. We've received testimony and support from DLNR. Mr. David Smith or Emma Ewan, if you're available, please proceed.
Yeah, hi, David Smith. I'm the administrator with the Division of Forestry and Wildlife. We'll stand on our written testimony and support.
Thank you. And we have received testimony and support from the University of Hawaii. If there's a representative, Mr. Wright, or other representative from University of Hawaii, the floor is yours. Please proceed.
Hello, good morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Branco, and the members of the committee. I'm Robert Wright. I'm the director of the Hawaii Institute of Geophysics and Planetology. The School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology at UH Manoa strongly supports HCR 102. As noted in the documents, we're the only state in the nation without a state geological survey, and yet many of the challenges and opportunities that Hawaii faces now and will continue to face in the future are related to geological resources and hazards, which can only fully be evaluated by mapping and accounting for land and ocean resources within the state's borders. At UH Manoa and in SOAS, we have a large concentration of federally funded scientists who are actively researching topics such as earthquake hazards, volcanic hazards, tsunami hazards, but also groundwater, renewable energy, geothermal energy, beach, coastal erosion, landslides, and extreme weather events. And we've heard testimony from several people this morning about how floods and coastal erosion are impacting Hawaii's communities right now. And unfortunately, those impacts are only likely to grow in the future as a result of climate change. So we support the resolution, and we're more than willing and very happy to be of assistance in any future planning process that may result from this. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Director Wright. Appreciate it very much. That's all the testifiers we have before us today. Questions of our testifiers, members? If not, let's move on to the next measure. Thank you very much to our testifiers. Let's move on to HCR 119 HR 95, urging the Department of Agriculture, Department of Health, and Department of Land and Natural Resources to develop and implement a mosquito control program that uses Wolbachia bacteria to reduce both the rate of transmission of mosquito-borne diseases and mosquito population levels throughout the state. We have testimony in support from DLNR. Mr. David Smith, please proceed.
Yeah, good morning. Our testimony might have gone in a little late, so I'm not sure we got the written, but we did submit some written testimony in support. We are working on Wolbachia mosquito as a technique to control mosquitoes. Controlling mosquitoes on a landscape scale is going to be crucial to saving our endangered Hawaiian forest birds. If we aren't able to roll out some kind of landscape scale mosquito control program. And, in the next couple of years, we'll probably lose, up to 4 species of forest birds in the next 4 or 5 years. So it's absolutely crucial if we want to continue to keep these birds on the landscape. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'll note that members, we do have their expanded testimony with their suggested amendments in our packet. Next, we have testimony in opposition from the Department of Agriculture. Director Phyllis Shimabukuro Geyser. If you're available, please proceed.
Hi, this is Darcy Oishi, Acting Branch Manager for Plant Pest Control Branch, Hawaii Department of Agriculture, submitting testimony in lieu of Chair Geyser, Shimabukuro Geyser, who had to run a board meeting. The department stands on its testimony against this measure. Thank you. I'll be available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Oishi. Next, we have testimony in support from the Department of Health, Environmental Health Administration. If you're available, please proceed.
Good morning, Representative Tarnas and members of the committee. The Department of Health stands on its written testimony in support of the measure with amendments, and we're available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Next, we have written testimony support from Brian Miyamoto with Hawaii Farm Bureau. And we have testimony before us today from Christy Martin from the Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species. Christy Martin, if you're available, please proceed. Christy Martin, if you're available, please proceed. You may need to unmute.
Yes, mahalo. Thank you so much. Christy Martin with the Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species. We're in strong support of this measure. Native birds have been imperiled for many years, and that's only getting more serious with climate change. The available habitat for native birds is actually, it's quite expansive. There's enough native forest to support these birds if we're able to control how the mosquitoes are infecting those birds. They just bite non-native birds to pick up avian malaria, and then they can bite native birds, which is deadly to the native birds. So if we could reduce that transmission, either by controlling the mosquitoes or controlling their ability to spread the disease, we can continue to have native birds into the future and perhaps even more of them. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. Next, we have written testimony in our packets from the American Bird Conservancy, Chris Farmer, from the Nature Conservancy Hawaii, Anthony Ching, and from Patrick Hart. That's all the testimony we have before us today, members. Any questions of our testifiers? Vice Chair Branco, please proceed.
For Mr. Smith? Mr. Smith, could you let me know if this program moves forward, around how many bird species we would be able to save, and also let me know the window that we need to do something to make a significant impact in protecting our birds?
Okay, the trajectory on native forest birds has been going downhill for decades, and we're currently at the point where we have at least one species, the kiwikiu, or the Maui parrotbill, which it might be too late already. We're expecting it to possibly go extinct in the next couple of years. And so we've got emergency measures going, trying to save it in the field, possibly bring it in for, to raise in zoos. And we haven't quite made that decision yet, but it's highly imperiled. And there's at least 3 other species that are likely to be in the same condition within the next couple of years. And these are species that used to be relatively common. Our entire native forest bird, suite of native forest birds are, for the most part, I'd say 90% of them are imperiled by mosquitoes and the avian diseases that they carry. So our native birds don't have resistance to avian malaria, avian pox. And what we've been looking at and worried about, the mosquitoes have been held down by cold temperatures to about 4,000 feet. So above 4,000 feet, our birds have been in pretty good, decent shape. They can survive. They've been surviving okay. They're declining, but they're not crashing. All of a sudden, that level's gone up to 5,000 feet or more because of climate change impacts and warming climate. And so we've lost a huge amount of habitat in a really short period of time. We didn't realize it until we tried to do a translocation with the parrotbill over on and Maui, and all the birds died in 1 week because of avian malaria. So all of a sudden we realized, oh my God, this is 5,000 feet. This is supposed to be safe. And now these birds are in a lot of trouble. So most of our birds, save for a couple such as Amakihi, El Payo, and a couple others that seem to have turned the corner and are, you know, surviving at lower elevations. Most of our forest birds are not immune to these diseases and are susceptible to perishing due to disease transmission from mosquitoes.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Oishi?
Yes.
My question to you folks is, hearing just what DLNR had mentioned, and I see that you folks are in opposition. From what I read in your testimony, it seems as if your perspective is that it's moving forward, the introduction of the WAL bacteria is going to happen. But from the previous speakers, it seems like there's an extreme sense of urgency. And so if this is moving forward, then why isn't it happening already? And why doesn't the Department of Agriculture have the same urgency as the other departments?
The Department of Agriculture has already initiated the review process necessary for these actions. We are currently the package for that would ultimately be heard by the Board of Agriculture is in review by our subject matter specialists. It will then go to the Plants and Animals Advisory Committee on Plants and Animals for input, and finally to the Board of Agriculture. So the process is already occurring, Representative, and I don't have an exact timeline of when the process will be completed as of yet, but it is the process is moving forward.
So you don't have an exact timeline, but it's imminent that these bird species are going to pass away forever. And so I'm just trying to emphasize to you folks the urgency that we need to do something for our native birds. And so I understand the process is going, but this is why this resolution is here, to show that there is a clear urgency, and I don't see that from the Department of Agriculture.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Other questions? Representative Kobayashi.
For Department of Agriculture, you don't have a timeline, but is the approximate window a matter of weeks, months, or years before this process is approved? And the potential of that Wolbachia bacteria can be used in Hawaii?
Thank you for the question, Representative Kobayashi. The department, I represent a different branch from what that oversees this process. So I will relay the question and we can get back to the committee on a more precise timeline to address this. I am not clear on the full process that will be needed. So I hesitate to say whether this will be weeks, months, or years, although likely it will not be years, but I want to verify with our the plant quarantine branch to be able to adequately respond to your request.
Thank you.
If you would please, Mr. Oishi, please provide the information on the process as well as your expected timeline to me as chair, and I will share it with the other members of the committee.
We'll do so.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any other questions, members? Representative Gannaditt.
So Mr. Smith, for future reference, what is the status of native forest birds here on Oahu? Things like the famous EEV, the Elapayo. How populous are they here in urban Honolulu, like in this 900,000 human being island?
Yeah, Oahu's a tough case because it doesn't have anything over 4,000 feet. So pretty much all of our zone for forest bird habitat is also mosquito zone. So a lot of the bird diversity has been thinned out significantly. We did have some straggler EEV. They haven't been seen for some years now, but they hadn't been seen for a dozen years, and we saw half a dozen of them up in the Kotlaus. This is probably 10 years ago, and I don't think we've seen them since. We've done a lot of research on Elapayo. They survive in both secondary forest and in the lower forest zone. So they've done quite well adapting. We've done a lot of research on them. It seems like rats are their biggest problem right now. And, Apapani seem to be hanging on. EEV will come down into, blanking on, we've seen the Amakihi are the ones that are coming down into low elevations. They seem to be turning the corner, but we don't know why some are doing it and some aren't. Most of the other diversity, the creepers, the akepas, things like Akiapalau and a lot of the other diversity that you see on the higher islands like Maui and Hawaii, we don't have those anymore. And a lot of birds of species have already gone extinct. And we're just hoping on Oahu that we can manage the threats such as rat predation to protect the birds that are still occurring here.
So some birds have established a genetic resistance against it, like that.
Yeah, and that's really what we're hoping for. I mean, ultimately, if they could establish genetic resistance, that would be the best, but we don't have time. We're just hoping that this mosquito thing can buy us some time so they can maybe start to develop that resistance. Right now, it's sort of like, when diseases go into a native human population. So for instance, when when folks started coming over to Hawaii, Native Hawaiians were not resistant to smallpox, and they got severely diminished. Probably 90% of the population was wiped out. And the same thing's happening with the birds. They've been living out here in the middle of the ocean for all these years. They didn't have resistance to these diseases that are occurring on a lot of the continental land masses. And they were really susceptible. So when these things came in from outside and carried by mosquitoes that came in from outside, all this stuff is non-native. And when it came into the native wildlife populations, it just devastated them. So we're hoping that mosquitoes, we're hoping they can develop resistance over time. Some birds have shown that they can do that. For several species right now, we have run out of time and they are going to go extinct
Thank you so much.
in the next half dozen years or so if we can't do something about it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? If not, let's move on. Thank you to our testifiers. HCR 83 and HR 71, urging the Department of Health to amend its administrative rules to allow for commercial sale of rabbit meat for consumption. We have testimony in opposition from Sylvia Dolena, Aloha Animal Advocates, and Pele Lani Farm. Testimony in opposition from Inga Gibson with Pono Advocacy. Ms. Gibson, if you're available, please proceed.
Aloha, Chair. Thank you, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, and committee members. I really appreciate that the state and the committee in particular is looking at new ways of food independence and sustainability. Unfortunately, this issue, rabbit meat, is much more complex and controversial than I think many know. First of all, the Reso requests basically handing off a lot of these responsibilities to locally licensed state veterinarians. There are actually federal laws that require that the inspections continue to be done by federally recognized USDA FSIS inspectors. And they also still require that any slaughter of rabbits occur at a USDA licensed facility. So I think, there's a lot more federal nexus, federal oversight that needs to be considered. There's also a tremendous concern with potential environmental impacts. As we all know, there are no native rabbit populations. The rabbits that have become loose, obviously often offspring of abandoned pets, have become an issue. I refer you to some of the testimony by BISC and other invasive species committees. So setting up a commercial operation obviously creates a great risk to our environment should these animals become loose. There are tremendous welfare concerns with animals, with these rabbits being kept in large-scale facilities. There are public health and zoonotic issues. The National Institutes for Health and estimate that about 75% of emerging diseases come from animals. So obviously, anytime you're looking at a commercial, potentially intensive confined operation, you're looking at potential for zoonotic diseases. I just wanted to mention that Whole Foods a few years back did attempt to bring some commercial rabbit meat to the market. There was massive opposition. There wasn't the consumer demand that they expected. So this isn't an issue that we're seeing a lot of demand. I haven't, in talking with chefs, seen that this is something I don't see in their testimony that they're requesting. Also, I'm concerned because the veterinary community has not been consulted about this. And I think ultimately that this measure is premature. I think the right thing to do if the committee is committed to looking into this would be to do a cost benefit analysis, and most importantly, an environmental risk analysis of allowing any kind of commercial rabbit breeding operation, rabbit meat operation. And just in closing, one of the grave concerns with welfare is that rabbits, like poultry, are not covered under the Federal Humane Methods of Slaughter Act. So there is not that additional federal oversight that is really necessary to ensure that these animals are treated well and that disease issues are adequately being monitored. So another way to address the larger issue would be to amend the reso and actually request that the USDA include rabbits and poultry under the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act. So we urge your holding this bill, deferring this bill, at the very least until more research can be done. And I'm not sure whether or not the Department of Health has weighed in on this, but this is really an issue for the Board of Agriculture and the Department of Agriculture as well. So thank you for the opportunity, Chair, and request you defer or hold this measure.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in opposition from Lindsay Verherlig. Testimony in opposition from Animal Rights Hawaii, Asgard, or Catherine Gogol. If you're available, please proceed.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Tarnas and members of the committee. My name is Kathy Gogel, and I'm president of Animal Rights Hawaii. We are one of the oldest animal rights organizations in the US, founded in 1977. We are in strong opposition to this bill. As Inga mentioned, it is impossible for the Department of Health to oversee slaughter of meat animals, just impossible. DLNR has specific rules for rabbits, for pet rabbits. They must be kept in cages well above the ground because the fear of rabbits getting loose is a very, very necessary evil to worry about. And also the zoonotic possibilities of another CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation in Hawaii, is not a good idea. That is where SARS started. That is where African swine flu started. And it is believed that that is where COVID-19 started. So I do ask that you hold this bill. It's very, very ill-conceived. And although protein is, of course, important in people's diets, there are other sources that don't involve something as tenuous as this. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, we've received written testimony with comments from the Big Island Invasive Species Committee, written testimony in opposition from the following individuals: Amanda Henson with Animal Rights Initiative, Corey Harden, Deborah Ward, Vivian Tollner, Sue-Ann Phillips, Hannah, Ellen Jackson, Nadine Cheng, Margie Gilman-Wolf, Eric Pinto, Mary James. And we have testimony in support from Candy Hololeo Johnson from Ihilani Farms, and testimony in support from Sandra Tsukiyama. Sandra Tsukiyama, if you're available, please proceed.
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Good morning. We hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. As I'm the president of the Hawaii All-Breed Rabbit Club that has been founded in 1986, I'm also the state representative for the American Rabbit Breeders Association, which is an international organization dedicated to the promotion, development, and improvement of the purebred domestic rabbit. Yes, I stand in support of this measure, and I do agree with some of the points brought up by the previous speakers. However, in this field, it's the demand for rabbit meat and sustainability has totally been exacerbated by COVID. And I almost every week I'm asked by someone how they can start raising rabbits. So there have been a number of obstacles for the many people who have wanted to start a commercial rabbit raising endeavor to be able to market their meat to the public, but there are many obstacles. So let's see, as in the testimony that was written by Candy Johnson, I would encourage the swift improvement and facility of eliminating those obstacles, with whether they have to do with getting the federal regulations coordinated with the state, etc. Because in my experience, the demand is there for rabbit as a healthy meat. I believe that if you're going to be a carnivore, it makes more sense to eat rabbit than any other. And the demand is growing. Almost weekly, I get questions about rabbit raising for meat. So I'm open to any questions from the committee.
Thank you very much, Sandra Tsukiyama. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on these measures. Any questions for our testifiers? Vice Chair Branco.
For the representative from the Animal Rights Hawaii, I had a question in terms of, I grew up, I had a pet duck, but I also do sometimes eat duck. So I just wanted, what is the difference between the consumption of animals like duck and chicken and the consumption of rabbit?
Well, I really don't think that is quite relevant in this discussion because we're talking about another kind of issue, philosophy of vegetarianism for another time, perhaps. Actually, ducks are not covered under the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act either. So if your family killed a duck in the backyard for personal consumption, it is legal. Same thing if you wanted to kill a rabbit. However, the University of Hawaii, in its own publication describing the method of slaughter, includes hitting the rabbits on the head with a hammer. Now, that I don't think anyone would think is humane. So I'm sorry I can't answer your direct question, but the state of Hawaii gave up inspection of slaughtering in 1995 because it was too expensive. And you can't just fool around and tell the federal government you want them to change their rules. It's a long process and it would cost a lot of money for custom slaughter, a lot of overtime. And sorry, I went off your question, but there it is. That's an important issue to think about. It's not something you can just do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, members? If not, thank you to our testifiers. Appreciate very much your participation. Let's move on to our last measure on our agenda, HCR 131, requesting the establishment of a burial sites working group to review and recommend improvements to the burial sites program within the State Historic Preservation Division. We have testimony with comments from DLNR, State Historic Preservation Division, Hinano Rodriguez or Alan Downer. You're available, please proceed.
Aloha mai kako. I'm Hinano Rodriguez. My aloha to the chair, to Chair Tarnas and Vice Chair Branco. I am the History and Culture Branch Chief at the Department of Land and Natural Resources State Historic Preservation Division. And the department stands on its written comments, that of which is we acknowledge the intent of the resolution and we have offered comments. I'm here to answer questions.
Thank you very much. We have testimony and support from Kalahui, Hawaii, Heilani Sonoda Pale, or Komike Kalaaina. If you're available, please proceed. Anyone from Kalahui? Representative from Kalahui?
Yes, aloha.
Aloha. Please proceed, yes.
Hi, aloha Chair Tarnas and Vice Chair Bronco and members of the committee. Kalahui Hawaii stands on their testimony in support of this resolution. But I would like to also point out, and I hope all of you have had an opportunity to read the December 2002 audit of the State Historic Preservation Division. It was an audit and they found, I just want to point out, they found three things that were of concern. The disparate review standards that threaten the division's ability to protect historic sites, and that's continuing. The division is also, and this is from the state auditor, the division has also failed to ensure the safekeeping of historical artifacts in its custody, and the division's inventory of human skeletal remains is piecemeal. This is from the state auditor. They also had staff-related issues that were kind of concerning and serious. In a memorandum dated July 30th, 2004, the National Park Service Regional Director, and this is his words, stated that SHPD, quote unquote, misused historic preservation resources. SHPD receives historic preservation funds, federal funds, and they were audited as well by the National Park Service. They only reviewed 1 year, but they were very concerned with the state auditor's report, and they also did their own investigation as well, and helped to ensure that SHPD tried to address some of those issues that were brought up in the state auditor's report. It took them a year to start rectifying some of those issues that the state auditor brought up. So I want to just say that this is the issues that a lot of our community has it's not just something that just started last year or 2 years ago. It's been ongoing for decades. And it really speaks to the type of leadership that the Department of Land and Natural Resources is under. And also, I want to just say that we support the reso, but we would like more community input, more community representation. Thank you. That's all. Mahalo.
Thank you. Mahalo. Thank you very much. Members, we have written testimony and support from Mana Kalailani Kacheres, written testimony and support from Hina Le Moana Wong Kalu, testimony and support from Michelle Makalua Yi, testimony and support from Jennifer Noelani Ahia. Jennifer, if you're available, please proceed. Jennifer Noelani Ahia, if you're available, please go ahead. We hear you now. Go ahead.
Chair and Vice Chair, thank you so much for allowing me to be here today to testify. I am here on behalf of my Kanaka Maoli ancestors, whose graves have been desecrated over the past few decades. I am in support of HCR 131. Systemic mismanagement of burial sites program has led directly to the desecration of my kupuna. The cultural dissonance around the state's treatment of burials is part of the continuing legacy of settler colonialism here in Hawaii, and it contributes to the continuation of cultural genocide. I witness this firsthand on almost a daily basis, and I can tell you, it is not without injury. I'm writing as a recognized descendant of the Pu'uone burials in the sand dune complex of Central Maui, an area that is historically known to contain high concentration of burials. I have been advocating for the care and protection of these burials for several years and have come up against many roadblocks with SHPD and the burial sites program. I am in support of this proposed working group with amendments. I too would like to see the proposed balance of participants be reconsidered to include a larger percentage of the community members who are both Kanaka Maoli and cultural practitioners of Malama Iwi. As the bill is written, there is a preponderance of institutional appointees, some of whom are part of the institutional dysfunction of the department. And it would be prudent to make sure the voices of the people are included in such a group. It is also prudent not to allow the Senate, House, and chairs to choose the cultural practitioners. It would be better to let the Burial Council or OHA determine which community members have the working knowledge and capacity to sit on such a task force. The reasons for this working group are many due to the systemic dysfunctions in the department, and I will share a few examples of SHPD's failures that I have personally dealt with. I am attaching a letter to Governor Ige that I wrote in 2019, which is included in my written testimony. I hope that you folks get a chance to read. I've also attached a copy of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, or CERD, letter that the committee sent to Malamaka Kanilua in response to a complaint letter we sent them in 2019. I am a board member of Malamaka Kanilua, and we have been seeking remedy to our burial issues in multiple venues for years. The CERD letter is significant because the US is a treaty partner in the committee and is obliged to follow its lead. Both the federal government, the state, and local county government is responsible to investigate the findings and provide remedy. This proposed working group could possibly be a step towards fulfilling that obligation if this report leads to meaningful change. So aside from the examples in the governor's letter, which I can mention if I get to, I would also like to bring up something about a case that I'm the plaintiff in, IHEA versus DLNR, which had its preliminary injunction hearing in 2019. The full case has not been heard yet, but in the preliminary injunction findings of facts and conclusions of law signed by the Honorable Joseph E. Cardoza on April 19, 2019, it states, SHPD staff did not fill out department inadvertent discovery forms for every iwi kupuna encountered at increment 4. This is in phase 6 in Maui-Lani. SHPD staff did not fill out departmental inadvertent discovery forms for any of the iwi kupuna that HBT's archaeological firm encountered and considered to be disarticulated. Hinano Rodriguez of SHPD History and Culture Branch stated that SHPD had not followed proper procedures for inadvertent iwi kupuna because they are short-staffed.
Thank you. If you could summarize your testimony in support, that'd be great.
However, Mr. Rodriguez followed that testimony by saying there were no vacancies in his decision. So in conclusion, in times when SHPD is understaffed and when it is fully staffed, it fails as an agency to uphold its responsibility to protect and observe and preserve ancestral burials. There are many good people working in the agency whose voices are drowned out by the administrators. Whether it's SHPD's failure to ensure the archaeological firms it permits are actually in compliance with the rules, its failure to ensure monitoring reports are turned in, which leads to important data not being reported, its failure to require projects sent for review to have adequate AISs, proper mitigation plans, or its blatant misreading of the statutes regarding inadvertent fines. The department is responsible for the desecration of my kupuna and the ancestors of the Kanaka Maoli people. Thank you very much for hearing my testimony today. E malama ina iwi kupuna.
Malama, thank you very much. Mahalo nui loa.
Mahalo a'oe.
We also have written testimony and support from Dane Maxwell and from Adrian Kamali'i. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Any questions for our testifiers? If not, then that concludes our testimony today. Let me take a brief recess for decision making. Okay, reconvening for decision making on our hearing today. Senate Bill 140 SD2 HD1. I would like to pass out an HD2 technical non-substantive amendments. I want to change on page 2 the title of that part from project to program. That was just a mistake in the previous version. I did hear the concerns about from testifiers about the definition of TODs and is it around a bus stop or what, but I think according to my previous chairs, they'd like to keep the language as it is. And so we're going to move it forward with just those amendments. Any discussion, members? Vice Chair.
Appreciate the intent of the bill, but I'm going to be voting with reservations. I think to say that it won't happen or around bus stops and is different than saying that the bill will not allow that to happen. So just from my community perspective, I have some reservations.
Understood. Thank you. Other discussion, members? Representative Ganadin? I saw your
Reservations.
finger go up.
Reservations as well, noting the discussion around section 3 on page 9 and the fact that many of the communities most affected by HART aren't going to be appearing on the committee.
Thank you. So noted. Any other discussion, members? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass Senate Bill 140 with amendments. Chair votes aye, Vice Chair votes with reservations. Representative Ganadin votes with reservations. Representative Kobayashi.
Aye.
Representative Kong.
Aye.
Representative Morikawa.
Aye.
Representative Ono.
Aye.
And Representative McDermott is excused. The measure passes.
Thank you. Moving on, Senate Bill 225. I'd like to pass this out as is. It's an HD1 already. Any discussion, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass Senate Bill 225 as is, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Moving on, HCR 103, recommendations passed as is. Members, any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HCR 103 as is, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Moving on, HCR 89. We need to make some technical non-substantive amendments, so I'm recommending to pass out an HD1. Discussion, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HCR 89 with amendments, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Moving on, HCR 166. I want to recommend an HD1 modifying the title. So it says authorizing the issuance of a term non-exclusive easement covering a portion of state submerged lands at Kapa'a, Kawaihau, Kauai for construction of a groin and for use, repair, and maintenance of the improvements constructed thereon. Any discussion, members? So that's with that amendment. HD1, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HCR 166 with amendments, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Moving on, HCR 163, HR 139. I'd like to recommend we pass this out with an HD1 in the title, removing the word environmental impact statement, put in HRS chapter 343, and do the same thing in the be it resolved paragraph in the resolution itself. That's my recommendation. Discussion, members. Any discussion? Yes, Representative Ganadin.
Just my hope that this serves as a template for other communities to preserve land and culture.
Agreed. Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, recommendation pass out on HD1 with those changes. Vice Chair Bronco, please take the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HCR 163 and HR 139 with amendments, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Moving on, HCR 159, HR 135. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any discussion, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HCR 159 and HR 135 as is, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Moving on, HCR 96. Recommendation is passed as is. Discussion, members. Seeing none, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HCR 96 as is, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The The measure passes.
Thank you. Moving on to HR 81. Members, we passed out to you a proposed HD1 with some slight amendments in it, which is a combined effort of the introducer, Rep. Mariyoshi, and the second modifier, Representative Quinlan. So you can see that before you. It adds a few whereases and a couple of names of neighborhoods. So if you see that before you, members, any discussion on these? Seeing none, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HR 81 with amendments, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Moving on to HCR 147, recommendation is passed as is. Discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HCR 147 as is, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Moving on, HCR 129, HR 111. I acknowledge the opposition from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and respectfully are recommending that we pass this as is, and that the next Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs would be able to address some of these issues in their kuleana. So my recommendation, members, is to pass as is. Any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HCR 129 and HR 111 as is, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott. Is there any reservations? Representative Ganadin? Reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Moving on, HCR 102, HR 85. My recommendation is to pass out HD1, incorporating the amendments from the Office of Planning. And in the LRB testimony, they offered to draft legislation based on the findings that OP come up with. So I will adopt that as an additional amendment. So both the OP amendments and LRB amendments in our HD1. Any discussion, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HCR 102 and HR 85 with amendments, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Moving on, HCR 119, HR 95. Recommendation to pass out HD1, incorporating the amendments from DLNR and from the American Bird Conservancy from their testimony. You can refer to that if you need the details. Any discussion, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HCR 119 and HR 95 with amendments, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Moving on, HCR 83 and HR 71. I'm going to recommend that we defer this measure, and I will work with the rabbit farmers to figure out a solution moving forward on this with the relevant agencies. The resolution is not the best route to move forward. So I'll work with the rabbit farmers to see if we can find the best path forward with the relevant agencies in the state and the federal government. So my recommendation is to defer those two measures. Final measure, HCR 131. I'd like to recommend passing out HD1 with some technical non-substantive amendments. The sponsor has provided me with just a few technical non-substantive amendments that we're going to be including. This does go to his committee next, and so he can modify it more if he wants to do that. But on the be it further resolved, we're modifying the number. So under number 7, instead of 2 Native Hawaiian cultural practitioners to be selected by the Senate President, it would be 1. And then for number 8, instead of 2 Native Hawaiian cultural practitioners to be selected by the Speaker, it would be 1. The chair of the Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Committee, who is the author of this, will be hearing it next. And so he can make whatever additional changes he wishes in that hearing. Any discussion, members? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote on HD1 for HCR 131.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HCR 131 with amendments, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you very much. Members, I really appreciate your diligence in getting through this marathon session. This hearing is now adjourned.